Evening, everyone. Welcome to Strategy Session. I am Lisa Senecal, sitting in for Rick Wilson, who is, I believe, still trapped in an airport somewhere. Hopefully, we're going to see Rick again soon. Good luck, Rick. Hope if you ever get a flight, it's safe and easy. Tonight, I am joined by Stuart Stevens. I hope, oh, there he is. Simon Rosenberg is back. Thanks for being here, Simon, and Joe Trippi. We're going to dive right in because I want to make sure we get through as much as possible because we have 28 days until, I'm not going to say until the election because we're already voting in a lot of states. So let's start there, Simon.
Yeah.
We are voting in a lot of states already. Yeah. What can you tell us about what you're seeing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the polling has been very consistent and steady the last few weeks. There hasn't, in my mind, been a big jump. I mean, the New York Times poll today, which has been not a good poll for Democrats this cycle, had Kamala Harris up by 4 points. It says 3 here, but when they rounded it, it was 4. And her best poll in the New York Times poll of the cycle, she was, the last poll had the race dead even. She also gained in the Morning Consult weekly track. And in general, I mean, I think where the race is now is she's up 2 to 3, 4 points nationally. We're in better shape in the battlegrounds, but things are still really close. And, the theory of our case, right, is that, we had a modest lead. And then in the final 30 days, we're going to execute, and our superior ground game and our superiority in air would allow us to make it much more likely that we push the election towards us than they do towards them in the close, and that we win. And we are getting very early vote data. But, right now we're running ahead of 2020 in the early vote at this exact moment 4 years ago, which is encouraging. I mean, I think that, a lot of us thought we might actually run behind the 2020 vote because Republicans are actually trying harder in the early vote than they were last time, or at least notionally they were trying. Trump has sort of interfered with it. But the early vote data should be very encouraging to us that the same basic dynamic that we've seen since Dobbs, where we continue to overperform, where our grassroots army continues to go to work and push our performance to the upper end of what's possible, which we've seen again and again and again. It's in the early days of the early vote, and things can change. We're starting to see that same basic dynamic so far in the early vote of the general.
That's very reassuring to hear. I have been trying I've been trying for the past 8 years to figure out what the hell it is that Trump's doing, but let's just focus on the last few days because I can't understand the strategy. It seems like if you're ever really going to develop a strategy, getting one in place by the month out from the election day, it's time. So, Joe, what is he doing? Because he almost seems to be off the rails to the point and withdrawing from public view and doing rallies in California in the desert when it's 110 degrees. Like, who is he bringing in new? Who is he?
Well, this is something Stuart said for forever, that he needs to get new recruits, and he's doing everything he can to not do that. He needs to reach out to and grow. And the fact is, as Simon points out, like the polls today, continue to look at Trump's number. It's New York Times 49-46. There he is at 46 again. Morning Consult, he's at 45. I mean, every poll, forget the red wave crap that they're dumping, and Simon's been on top of this, and we were both, doing this in 2022, but it's happening again now in October, and we can talk more about that. But take the Republican red wave polls out and just look at real, polls that are independent or high quality. And he's always consistently in the last, and Simon did this today in the Hopium in his report that he puts out, just showed poll after poll where Trump's at 46, 45. The highest one is NPR. Maris, I think, had him with 48, but he's consistently, take that one out, he's been in all independent polls or quality polls 45, 46, which has been where he's been from the beginning since he came down the escalator. 46 in 2016, 46.7 in 2020, and so he keeps going back to that, and he's got to expand beyond that. He's got Biden won with 51% of the vote. I believe, and Simon's been saying that we got to win big. We've got to get bigger than Biden did in 2020. And I think right now she's on track to do that. It's going to take, we got to do the work. We've got to have the early vote. We've got to get people out. We've got to keep fighting the fight for these last 28 days or so. But I think this is headed to better. Biden won 51, 46.7, I think, in 2020. I think we can outdo that. I think Simon can be proven right here that we can exceed that if we continue to do all the work. But I can't tell you why Trump is following this. I mean, because it's who he is, right? He and J.D. Vance is who he is. He doubled down on this strategy of trying to up the ante to get to energize beyond belief his MAGA crowd, but that's it. It's not to expand the vote. It's to try to increase the number of his base that come out. And I'm not sure. I think to whatever
are there
extent
enough of them, though?
That,
I mean,
but it's not only that. Whatever extent he's doing that, I think he's also incentivized people who are going to stay home, people who are thinking of voting third party, people who may have had some angst about Biden being old, all those. That group is now being energized too to say, no mas, no, we don't want more of this. But that I don't know, Simon, what do you think?
Well, Stuart, let's hear from Stuart. Yeah.
Oh, look, if I had one wish about the Democratic Party, I wrote a piece about this, I don't know, about October 20th and 20. I wish the Democratic Party could act like they're winning. And I know you don't want to be...
No. Democrats don't do that. That's going to be a whole psychological change.
If I was Democratic Party, I would start every day by saying, we're right, they're wrong, we're winning, they're losing. There's more of us than they are of them. Walk with swagger. You want to walk out on the field like you think you're going to win and you're going to kick their ass and this isn't going to be close. And let's just get about the business of doing it. And I think that I get the whole, I think, Simon, you've written about this, that there is a PTSD about the Clinton race. But this isn't the Clinton race. And if it is the Clinton race, Harris is going to win because Trump's going to get 46.1%. And that's not going to be enough. So, I think in every sense, Democrats should feel that, we woke up this morning in a world in which Liz Cheney and Bernie Sanders are supporting the same candidate for president. That's a pretty remarkable world to wake up in. And I think, they should get about the business of saying this has never been done before. This is a patriotic movement that beyond party, beyond ideology. This is a party about reaffirmation of what it means to be an American, that the American experiment is alive and we're proving it. And that sort of call to action. It's not about inflation. It's not about the capital gains tax. It's not about all this stuff that we used to argue about. So I hope Democrats do more of that because I think that there is actually some data that would indicate that people tend to follow those who think that they're winning. And I think it also freaks the hell out of Trump world.
All right, so I'm gonna step into the swagger and ask you, Simon.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the fave unfaves of Trump versus Harris and Walz versus JD, and America likes us and they hate them. And every time, I mean, one of the reasons that we might be seeing less of Trump is that somebody is whispering in his ear that you really do better if people don't get a big dose of you. So try to, keep him out of the limelight as much as possible. But so here's the swagger. Why aren't we winning by more? Why aren't we seeing bigger? Because the fave on faves are not close in most cases.
Listen, I think we have to recognize just how unusual this election is, right? I mean, every day is a brand new day. I mean, this campaign had to fly the plane and rebuild it, in midair. And a candidate who had not been getting ready to run, entering an incredibly complicated set of things that she had to do, right? Take over the campaign, develop an argument, develop an agenda, pick a VP, do the convention, right? Like, this was 18 months of work in a few months. And the truth is, it's gone unbelievably well. I mean, they've had every week since she's been in has been a good week. She's not had a bad week. She's not had a really bad day. They haven't made any kind of crazy mistakes. The VP debate, in my mind, was kind of an opportunity lost, but not something that hurt us. And that's, for those of us who've been in the business, I mean, it's incredible that they continue to have good days and good weeks. And that, we got to, as the the manager of the Nats used to say, we got to go 1-0 a day, right? And so I think there's the degree of difficulty of what she had to do was incredible, particularly because when she got into the race, we were down by 3 or 4 points nationally. And Trump had the swagger, right, Stuart? And I agree with everything Stuart said. I think this inability for us to say we're winning, that Joe Biden's been a good president, that we've left the country far better than we found it. I mean, these kind of simple things, the struggle that we have. It was a struggle in 2000. It was a struggle in 2016. For us, when the new candidate came and there was a previous regime, and sort of this struggle to how to make sense of all that. And I think that we need to be better at being loud and proud, as I call it, right? We need to be better about extolling our virtues and reminding people of their lack of virtue and prosecute this thing strong. I think what's going to be interesting to watch this week, I'll say 2 last quick things. I do think that one of the things, and Stuart, you've been through these campaigns, in October, traditionally, the thing that galvanizes people and brings them to the table and focuses them on the election are debates. And we're not going to have debates. And so the campaign is having to sort of they're having to run now yet another kind of unprecedented thing that nobody's ever had to do before, create their own energy intensity. And I think it's why you saw this week the media blitz, as it's called, which I think has been really successful, of putting the vice president and Governor Walz everywhere, right, to sort of be talking to people all over the place, flooding the zone with their clips. It's been very, very successful, I think, in my view, this week. But I think Obama joining the campaign on Thursday and starting his first rally, I think is going to be Thursday could be, depending on what happens with the hurricane, an important day, because Obama joins the campaign at a rally in Pittsburgh, and she's got a big rally in Phoenix. And all of a sudden, I feel like the campaign on Thursday is going to start going into a more intense phase, right? We're more rally phase, more general election phase, with more assets and more people coming to the table. And we're going to have to, for everyone watching, I think part of what you have to realize that we need, because the vice president's having to run without the debates to sort of galvanize people, we need to do more. We need to help create more energy for her and intensity for her. It's not only her job, it's also our job. And it's why all the work that we do will matter even more than I thought it was going to, a few weeks ago, because of this need to sustain this intensity without these external drivers of the debates. And so, listen, of course, I'd like to be ahead by more, but I would much rather be us than them now. And we just have to go prosecute our campaign and run up the score as much as we can. And what I call win this thing in October, meaning that we need to go win it in the early vote. So by the time we get to election day, our margin is too high. They won't be able to catch up. And so far, the early vote is very encouraging. It's early. I don't want to overstate it, but what happened in 2022 was the early vote went up for us in the very early days, and it just stayed there, and it never dipped. And what's happening right now, I'm tracking the early vote every day. It just went up. We're above 2020, and it's just staying there. And We'll see what happens as more states come online. But, we should be encouraged by our financial advantage, our grassroots advantage, the early vote, right? Our team is stronger. It's better liked. We should be able to close stronger than them and go win this thing in the next month.
If I was in Trump world, I think there's an argument that he ought to debate every week because debates paralyze campaigns, and he would prepare for those debates. And
right.
She would, for every time you had a debate, that's 3 days he's going to come off the road. So, I think it's extraordinarily liberating for them, and it's a really important point, Simon, not to have debates, because it allows them to function as a campaign for more days. And they are functioning as a campaign at a higher level. And that is, I think, a huge mismatch of strength against weakness.
Yep.
The other thing I would add to what Simon said, though, and I know he believes this too, is that the Biden campaign fundamentally believed and invested in the grassroots in these battleground states. It believed that it needed it really needed to be able to turn out the Democratic base vote, and it needed to have a very big and powerful ground game, and they invested in it. What makes that even more powerful today is that investment was going on for months and months prior to Harris getting the nomination. And when she got the nomination, so that already huge investment in these battleground states, in the ground game for registration, for early voting, for getting out the vote, what happened was, one, two things: massive infusion of money advantage to continue to ramp that up.
Yeah.
And two, massive infusion of new energized volunteers who immediately started signing up into those organizations that were already existed, were already built by Jennifer O'Malley and the other people in that campaign. And so what we would typically think is an advantage for Democrats, I think, is amplified because of both the investment of the Biden effort going into it, and then what Kamala Harris and the energy that she brought to it, and the influx of more money and more volunteers is just a massive advantage, particularly when, and Stuart talked about this, the way that the RNC dismantled their entire, their entire thing.
I went Saturday. I went to the Ole Miss South Carolina game in South Carolina, and I went with an old buddy of mine who basically ran everything Republican in South Carolina from 2000 to 2016 when he couldn't get with Trump. And I was with a bunch of his pals, and a lot of them were sort of Republican Party stalwarts. And they were talking about how everything they had put together in South Carolina, and a couple of them were drifted over from North Carolina, had been, all their funding had been cut off. And they're like, fuck it. We spent 2 years doing this shit. And then they come in and, like Elon Musk, really?
Stuart, is it your line about eating the chess pieces? Is that your line? I don't know whose line that was.
I think that's a Rick Wilson line.
That's a Rick Wilson line. Trump doesn't play chess. He comes to the board and eats all the chess pieces, right? And this thing that they've done with, I can't tell you how insane the dismantling of the RNC was, and because we had, and Stuart, you and I have discussed this on various programs, since Dobbs, we have continually, our grassroots just exploded after Dobbs, right? And got supercharged. And we've continually, the whole Simon theory is that this is still the same election as the spring of 2022, is that, that we are, that there's been no fundamental shift in the dynamic, which is that we continue to overperform expectations. They continue to struggle. And part of the reason they struggle is that I think a big chunk of the Republican Party became very loosened from the Republican Party after Dobbs, that for many Republicans who are already worried about MAGA, this was just a bridge too far. It was too much. And you got to be kidding me. Like this party now, this MAGA party had become dangerous, right? And so you've seen performance problems for the Republican Party happen again and again and again and again all across the country in election after election, Kansas, Ohio, like wherever you want to look. And so you would assume that what Trump would have done, right, would have really overcompensated for that reality. And in fact, what they did was the exact opposite of what they should have done by dismantling. No one's ever run field outside of the campaign on these outside groups, and Turning Point Action turned out to be a massive grift. God knows where all the friggin' money went. And where you and so I wrote a piece yesterday about Politico had a story of like the 18th story of various Republicans saying, we don't have a ground operation. It's kind of a problem, right? Like, we don't see it. We know they claim it's there, but we don't see anybody. And there's now been like 18 of these stories written. It's still not really in the consciousness of the cable news discussion, right? But if that's all true, if Simon's right and Stuart and you're right about them dismantling the operation, you would see it in the early vote numbers, and you're seeing it in the early vote numbers, right? We are performing better than 2020. Nobody on our team believed we were going to perform better than 2020 because 2020 was COVID. Huge numbers of people voted earlier by mail. Mm-hmm. And so our expectation was that they would do better in the early vote this time than us because of the people reverting back to election day voting, and because they claim they're really now making this important to them. And these early vote numbers that are coming out have to be terrifying to the limited number of people in the Trump world that actually understand them, right? Which puts it probably in a very small number. But it is. Look, I mean, you can learn a lot. Early voting is not predictive, but the target early site looks at the today versus this same exact day 2 years ago and 4 years ago, and we're running substantially above 2020 right now, which is in an election we won by 4.5 points, as Joe's point. And so this early vote number should be very, very worrisome to the Republicans that are paying attention.
I think there's something corrosive about a campaign like the Trump campaign that talks so much about how they're trying to stop people from voting, and how they're trying to sort of curate the vote. That even if you're a Republican, it's instead of saying like how important it is to vote, how we used to say that, we never believed it, but regardless of who you vote for, go vote. But at least we sort of like, it was like a,
you knew the words, even if you.
Yeah, we would just say the words, even if, you didn't believe it. And they've created this culture that the voting system is corrupt. So, but we want you to participate in a corrupt system. Trump goes around the country saying the only way we're going to lose is if they cheat. And you won't need to vote. It's a very mixed message, and it's very reminiscent of the January 5th, 21 environment that they went into Georgia, where I still just look at those campaigns as like winning the World Series in 4 perfect games. I mean, you elected the Jewish guy and the black guy from Georgia in a runoff.
And we never win runoffs, right? Runoffs were designed to prevent us from winning, right?
To stop you from winning.
Right, exactly.
And the Jewish guy and the black guy won in Georgia. It was like, really?
But they really, part of there was great work done on the Democratic side, obviously, and they were 2 phenomenal candidates. But the extra hand that Trump gave to make sure that they won those runoff elections was no small factor. And he really, and I think what you're saying now, Stuart, is exactly right. If people feel as though he is telling the truth and the Democrats are as good as they are at rigging elections, even though down ballot. Apparently they can only rig the ones at the top. But then why show up? Why participate? Throw up your hands. We'll wait for the revolution. And why am I going to go out and vote? But that does make me worry. What happens? So is the plan what happens from November 6th until January 6th? What is the post-election either legal or chicanery, the ridiculous bullshit that they're pulling in Georgia that Brian Kemp is keeping quiet about? What is happening in these swing states right now that we really need to be watching for? And is there anything that we can be doing to shine a greater light on those as part of what we need to be doing between now and the election? Who wants to jump on that one?
Well, no, I think we have to clearly anticipate that like at 10 o'clock on November 5th, Donald Trump's going to go down to the podium and declare he's the winner, regardless of what anything is happening in any of the states and any of the count at that point. And I think we have to prepare people for that it's going to be the same scam that he tried to pull in 2020 and came very close to pulling off. And so I think, the most important, I think, look, we have to do everything we can to keep that early vote count up, to get the vote out, to keep doing the work going into November 5th and winning it there. But the one thing we have to be vigilant about is that the period from November 5th to January 20th, it's not over on November 5th. We have to keep the focus and keep the fight on, because we have to assume and we have to count on the fact that he is going to continue to lie, continue to do what he did in 2020, and continue to claim that overnight, as absentee and mail-in ballots were counted, that we all stole the election somehow, which is all crap and lies. But we have to be prepared to stay vigilant. I'm talking about listeners, people out there, citizens, voters, and stay on top of that, and not just big sigh of relief on November 5th when we believe Kamala Harris has it, to walk away. No, we've got to keep the pressure on the guardrails of democracy to make sure they hold between November 5th and January 20th.
I think Schumer ought to go out and say, well, if the election's not legitimate, then we're not going to seat these senators who just were elected by Republicans. Because obviously, if the top of the ticket is illegitimate, the entire ballot's illegitimate. It's such been an absurdity that these people, all of whom got elected, say the election process was corrupt. I never could figure this out. It's like what Lisa's saying. So the top of the ticket, it's like these people in 2016, like Rob Portman, they said, I'm not going to vote for Trump, I'm going to vote for Pence. It's like, how does that work?
You can split ticket, but not actually the same.
They have Ohio, they have these different ballots. I haven't seen it.
So, hey, Lisa, can I just, before we go, I just want to say one thing that people anticipating this can do is to vote early. And the reason why voting early matters is that the American people need to see an orderly election take place over the next month, see enormous numbers of people voting without any kind of chicanery or interference and it creates this idea that everything is working, right? And that large numbers of people have voted. This whole process is working as intended. If we're up in the polls, right? There are things we can do that can make it harder for him to be persuasive with his universe that this is actually something that happened. And one of them is driving the early vote as big as it possibly can be, because then it will be, first of all, there will also be more Americans who will have voted without interruption themselves. So the fact that people have voted becomes a bulwark also against the efforts that people have, because they're going to say, F that, man, I voted and everything was cool. And so it is this driving the early vote. There's a lot of reasons why the early vote matters, but this is certainly one of them. The other reason, if I can just say before we go, is that when you vote early, you allow the campaign to move on to lower propensity voters faster, which then grows our
hugely
vote.
important.
And makes it more likely we win, right? And which is part of what happened in 2022. I call it a virtuous cycle of participation, is the phrase I use to describe this. And what's happening is, here's just some interesting data for the two of you. I mean, for the three of you, is that we in the increased vote of Democrats so far, the part of our voter base that's voting much more than voted 4 years ago is super voters, or prime Dems, as we call them, the people that vote most regularly, who have decided to go vote early for a variety of reasons. But when those super Dems vote early, they come off the GOTV rolls immediately, right? And the campaigns start immediately pursuing lower propensity Democrats. So if you're listening tonight, you should try to vote on day one, or as early as you possibly can. I'm voting on Friday here in Washington, even though it doesn't really matter that much. Because when you vote early, you actually make more Democrats. And so it's really important that you understand this, and also tell all of your friends across the country that if they want to help Kamala Harris, one of the most important ways they can do it is by voting early.
And that builds on the money that they have and the organization they have. In other words, we all are in this in a way that amplifies all the advantages and gives them the capacity to use that money and the base organization they have to reach voters that are less likely to turn out, and gives them more time to get them out. And that's a massive advantage, and we can all make it make it happen.
I love when we end these shows with marching orders. There is so much that we can all be doing between now and November 5th. So one of the great places, if you need constant refreshers of what you can be doing, is to go to Hopium Chronicles. I can't say enough about the community. We refer to Hopium Chronicles as a newsletter. It's so much more than that you built, Simon. This is a real community of hyper engaged activists and people who just deeply care about what's happening in this country. And whether it's your postcarding or the talks that you do, I just encourage everybody to go and subscribe, follow what Simon has to say, and the information that he's sharing, including about down ballot races and what you can do in various different states to support candidates that have a real shot at flipping seats or taking open seats. So check out Hopium Chronicles on Substack. Make sure you tune in to Joe Trippy's That Trippy Show every Friday. It is a phenomenally good, informative, low drama, high information, really good podcast. Stuart writes a column for us every week at Resolute Square. Please do subscribe. You guys are supporting what we do here. You're supporting democracy and allowing us to spend the time we are doing everything we can between now and November 5th, but also after that, because we've got a lot of work to do. We've just got a lot of work to do. It's not gonna end after this election, but we can win this one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, all three of you, for being here. And we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, everybody.